So we are missing a few directors that we should see joining us very soon. One is having some technical difficulties. Before I turn things over to Chair Bush for Environment, I just would like to welcome Katie Robinson, Director Katie Robinson, who has been appointed to our board. So she is replacing Director Kimberly. So welcome, Katie. Thank you for being here. And also welcoming alternate Judy Sentis, who is filling in for Director Vasilaki. Judy is having some technical difficulties, but we are working with her to get her on board ASAP. So that being said, I'm going to turn things over to Chair Bush to do Environment and Infrastructure.
Thank you. I'd like to bring Environment and Infrastructure Committee meeting to order. Would somebody move the agenda? Move, second. Okay, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. So this morning we have delegations. Mr. Dan, we're not sure of his last name, Buffett, and he can correct me if it's wrong, and CEO of Dave Conley of Habitat Conservation Trust Foundation. Mr. Buffett and Mr. Conley will address the board to share updates with regard to conservation and forest enhancement projects within the regional district. Good morning.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good.
Go ahead.
This is David Conley calling from the Forest Enhancement Society, and I'm waiting for my colleague Dan Buffett to come online and share our screen for our presentation. We're very pleased to be here today. Thank you for your time.
Great.
Thank you.
And thank you, everyone. It's Dan Buffett from the Habitat Conservation Trust Fund. I'm just sharing my screen and just making sure everybody can see the screen. Good.
Yes, looks good. Go ahead.
Looks good. Thank you. Well, thank you very much for giving both Dave and I the opportunity to meet with you today. And as Dave had alluded to, what we're here today is just to give you an update on both of our organizations, how we're investing for fish and wildlife habitat in the Okanagan-Similkameen Regional District. And essentially, we're both funding organizations and putting money in the hands of leaders in your community. And to give you just a bit of a quick overview of the Habitat Conservation Trust Foundation. So we, as our organization, fund conservation projects and provide education about BC's freshwater fish and wildlife throughout BC. And I'll just hand it over to Dave there just to give a similar sketch of FESBC.
Thanks, Dan. So the Forest Enhancement Society of British Columbia is, as it says, it's a society. We are very closely linked with the government, the provincial government, and work hand in hand with the province to deliver our purposes. We have 5 purposes, but primarily we're focused on environmental and resource stewardship of BC's forests. And we work very closely on Crown land, delivering operations through proposals, and we'll speak a little bit further about that as we go. We've been in existence for about 4 years, and I'll highlight that a little further in the presentation.
Great, thanks, Dave. And yeah, and similarly, HCTF, our background, we are a nonprofit charitable foundation, and we were founded in 1981. And essentially, we were founded by anglers, hunters, trappers, and guide outfitters who got together and said, in addition to our license that we pay, we're willing to pay an additional cost called a surcharge, and we want to put that together collectively to improve conservation outcomes in BC. So that's how we started with these 4 groups, putting additional money together on the table for outcomes. And so that amounts nearly to almost $6 million a year now. We also generate some income from court costs and fines for people that have compromised some of the environmental laws in BC. And we also income from the province for some specific projects I'll mention a little bit later. And a big component of our income is from partners. So FESBC, that is here today, collectively working together, their income that they bring to the table allows us then to fund more projects and just to focus on forest type and those species that live within there. Since 1981, we've funded $189 million in grants for nearly 3,000 projects. And this year in BC was actually a banner year for us. We broke our record and funded the most projects ever, a little over $9 million for 180 projects, back in March this year. And as we focus within the Okanagan region, that's a delivery of 15 projects, a little over $500,000. So some of the projects you may or may not be familiar with would be funding the Okanagan-Similkameen Partnership. Works with communities for the last 6 years on enhancement within the Okanagan-Similkameen. The picture here you're seeing on the right is a person that's looking at monitoring mussels within a number of the lakes within the Similkameen and trying to detect the zebra or quagga mussels, which we are trying to avoid in BC. And so this is an early warning system with the funding partnership with the province. And on the education side, we also fund wild schools, which are place-based learning within certain elementary schools, and support a number of education facilitators that help integrate nature curriculum with a number of the schools in the area. And in addition to that, we fund some GO grants, which are essentially covering the cost of buses for students to get out into nature. This is just a spatial distribution of the projects just in that South Okanagan area. The blue icons just showing fish projects. So these are typically a couple projects we funded that are learn to fish, getting youth out and new anglers in the area, supporting the aeration of different lakes, Kid Lake, Burnell Lake within the area, and water control structure. Green icons are the wildlife projects, so working with a number of mule deer and larger animals as bighorn sheep and funding projects there. And I had mentioned in the yellow is more of that outreach projects I'd mentioned, that Okanagan-Similkameen and Mussels project. So the partnership that FESBC and HCTF have had, began back in 2016, and both organizations have a mandate to improve wildlife. And so in the discussions with both organizations going back, HCTF has a strong regulated technical review process where we receive nearly 400 proposals every year for funding. We only fund sometimes up to 50% because that's as far as the money can go. And as every proposal comes in, we have a technical review panel that consists of government and experts that review every proposal that comes in, gives it a score, and then that moves to our board then to approve the funding. So it does undergo quite a rigorous process. So with FESBC, their additional funding helps fund more of the good quality proposals. And FESBC also brings to the table their connections, their science, and with the forest industry, the forest landscape, to actually create, and help generate better projects as well that we fund over time. And I'm just going to hand it over to Dave now, just to talk a little more specifically about FESBC.
Thanks, Dan. So our society has 5 purposes: preventing and mitigating the impact of wildfires, improving or the damaged or low-value forests, like Dan says, improving habitat for wildlife, and supporting the use of fiber from damaged or low-value forests, as well as one of our largest purposes, which is to manage climate change through the avoidance or reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. And so those 5 purposes basically drive our organization. We have a board of directors, an executive director, and a small team of operations people like myself. And so we are a very lean organization. We've delivered programs very effectively across all those 5 purposes that you see highlighted here. And you can see that as of today, we have over 250 projects province-wide going on, and we are committed to $233 million for those 250 projects. So we're essentially almost fully committed in terms of our funding. We received grants in 2016 for $85 million, and again in 2017 for $150 million. So our total grants from the province from the wildfire surplus program was $235 million. So right now at this point in time, we have extended opportunities and made commitments to fund those numbers of projects in each of those purposes. And we're very pleased to be engaged this far along the way, and certainly reflect back to you and your organizations as local governments to recognize the opportunities that existed in the area. And in the Okanagan-Similkameen, you were one of the first areas in the province that we were able to fund early stage projects. And we have a number of those. Dan, I'll get you to flip the slide for me, please. In the projects in the Okanagan-Similkameen area, we started off intensively with RDOS partnerships with the fuel breaks, and we had contractors, Davies Wildfire Management and Frontline Management, working in your area, developing coordinated fuel management plans with your organization, and then ultimately developing prescriptions that led to treatments, and those treatments are ongoing as we speak. So good recognition to you and your organization for stepping forward and recognizing the risks associated with your communities in interfaith areas, and taking advantage of the opportunity to apply for funding early on. So we've been very active in your area. Approximately $3 million of the total dollar value of FESBC has been invested in your regional district. A couple of highlighted projects there. The Weyerhaeuser has a number of projects going on in your area. One is a fertilization project in their tree farm license, which is enhancing the forest carbon benefits. It's growing trees faster, and as a result, sequestering atmospheric gases and carbon, and storing that in trees as they grow, and ultimately will generate long-term employment opportunities for the Republic of British Columbia in that tree farm license. Mount Baldy, really quickly there, we have worked closely with the previous management team of Mount Baldy and developed an integrated fuel management project that is designed to protect the lower elevations and the cabin areas associated with Mount Baldy from the potential risk of devastating wildfire coming up that valley. So that project is now completed. With you guys directly, we funded a number of fuel breaks, and those are in prescription formats. And primarily Penticton and Ellis Creek were 2 areas that we did the work early on, and then we're very pleased to have Wild Sheep Foundation come in and work closely with our organizations and the ministry to help you deliver treatments in those areas. So those have successfully been implemented. And then we have a large number of various projects across the region that are helping to move wood that is typically left behind during timber harvesting areas. And the wood that is left behind typically gets burnt. And as you know, in the Okanagan, that is a very challenging opportunity. First of all, the smoke settles into the valley, creates poor air quality, and as well, that smoke contributes to GHG emissions, which changes our climate. And so we're very active in trying to utilize that wood rather than have it go up in smoke in local piles. So those are the kinds of work that we're doing in your area, and we're pleased to be continue to do that work over the next few years with you. And we look forward to the opportunity to receive future grants from the province that would allow us to continue to do more of this kind of work in your region.
Great.
Thank you. Oh,
Great.
go ahead.
Oh, sure. And I was just going to thanks, Dave, for outlining that, and then just to finish off here, these are some of the co-funded projects between both organizations. Obviously, a focus in the forest landscape area with mule deer, the picture you're looking at here, with funding to UBC, looking at mule deer response to both wildfire and how that changes in the habitat with climate are going on. The next two projects are really working with looking at how to better improve forest management in the use of clear cuts for a number of different types of due to pine beetle and how it affects a number of the fur bearers, the martens, the weasels, things like that. And these are projects that have gone a couple consulting firms to pull this information together. And then finally, an ongoing support with the OSDP program, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with, working with local governments and communities to provide some expertise and policy and information with integrate fish and wildlife conservation. So, today is just, no ask at all from both organizations. It's more just to give all of you an update of sort of a lot of great work that's going on in the region, working with a number of the leaders within the regional district that are putting these projects on the ground. And wanted to, again, thank you for the opportunity to speak today. And our contact information is there, and if there is time for questions, happy to answer those. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you, Dave, as well. Very informative presentation and very impressive numbers. Do we have any questions for these? Okay, Director Rover.
Yes, thank you to the chair. And my question, I heard $3 million in our area, I think, wildfire risk reduction. Of the total 233 million roughly outlined in your presentation, how much of that was in the Okanagan-Similkameen region? And if you can break it down a little by category, if that's possible.
Out of the 233 that has been committed, 3 million is in the Okanagan-Similkameen region. And the majority of that is in 8 large projects that happened. And I highlighted, I think, 4 or 5 on the screen. The majority of the work in the Okanagan-Similkameen region has been wildfire risk reduction.
Go ahead, Director.
Yeah, and thank you for that clarification. On fisheries or fish rehabilitation, my next question is, anything with respect to return of salmon to Skaha Lake, to the region? That's a big issue in our area, and I'm just curious if you can shed any light on if anything to do with fish habitat and salmon specifically.
Oh, on the salmon side with Skaha Lake, there wasn't this year a number of projects funded. Just that those projects weren't submitted this year. So it is something I know with our technical committee and some of the government looking at what are the opportunities, in that area to fund. I think there's a little bit of funding going to Skaha just on the operational side, but not at the scale that I think your question is targeting, is more of securement of and restoration of fish habitat. And I know a few years ago there was some in our funding pots, but it hasn't been in the last couple of years. So I'm happy to find out if you want to just give me a quick email there, or if I could get your contact information, and then I can follow up with you after, just touch base with the problem, just to see what the status is.
Okay, one more. Go ahead.
Yeah, so thank you to the chair. Thank you very much for indulging another question. I appreciate that. And it's a thank you for the presentation, and a comment, a thank you to the work done on wildfire mitigation. Our community association engaged Davis and Associates twice in the last 10 years. They came out and gave us lots of information and help. And then since I was elected, staff were very helpful. Mark Wood's department, Doug Reeve contacted me, asked if we were interested in a grant for fire smarting. And I want to say that we just had a fire. I was put out of my home 2 weeks ago. And our whole neighborhood, 319 people, the Christie Mountain Fire. And we had over 85 firefighters, volunteer firefighters, who really deserve a lot of appreciation and credit on this. I spoke to our local firefighters, but firefighters from as far away as Armstrong. And what they said, and I think this is real important, they said thank you to the community for the fire smarting. They could see the work done, and they said it helped them save our homes. So I want to say thank you to you, because what you're doing is appreciated. It's important, and it's really good investment of the monies that you're taking care of, these things you're doing. So thank you very much.
Okay, Director Knowles. Oh, sorry.
Very appreciate your comments. Thank you very much for that. We do want to share that back at you. It takes a partnership to identify the priority areas, and it certainly does require the resources and funds to make that happen. So we're pleased to be able to participate in that effort. And you know, the area that Christie Mountain Fire happened in is now relatively fire smart as a result of that. So there's not very many critical areas left down in your area. You've done a fantastic job of identifying your priority areas and working closely with BC Wildfire Services and implementing your community wildfire protection plan. So it takes leadership like yours to make that happen. So we're pleased to be part of that. Thank you.
Director Canola, did you still have a question?
Yes, I do. Thank you. Through the chair, I'd like to thank you, gentlemen, very much. Outstanding job that you're doing. I have 3 comments. First on invasive mussels, and hopefully we'll do more there. These things are a scourge, and if they get foothold in here, it's going to be a terrible reality to look at in the future if it happens. Secondly, on the removal of burning materials, burnable materials, I know that you cannot manage 100% of the removal, but just, you know, I'm pushing a program for the use of trench and air curtain burners to lower the smoke created when these wastes are burnt on site. So hopefully you will be able to look at that, and I'd be happy to forward you information. I believe that trench burners would fit your uses quite nicely. And further on to that, in the Mount Baldy area, of course, my hat's off to you for the fire reduction on Crown lands. And hopefully we can do some more in that area, in particular the east side of the OIB lands could do with looking at, and along with Shrike Hill, which suffered a fire a year ago. There's a lot of lands in that area, along with some other areas, and I'd be happy to put these forward to you in the future if you're willing to take a look at some of these other areas. Thank you.
So thank you. Director Roberts, did you have a question?
Yes, thanks to the chair. First of all, my apologies. Due to technology, I was 8 minutes late, so I may have missed some things, and I may be asking questions that others have already had an answer to. First off, yeah, it's all the good work that you've been doing, and I'm hoping to see a little bit more in the Area G area, and you know, we're struggling with areas like Olalla and Headley with small communities that have quite a large senior population. And they're starting to get these fire smart groups. And I'm trying to find ways that, how can I as a director be more supportive, finding ways to connect that fire smart group to the good work that you're doing, as well as encouraging some work in regards to, like say, fire smarting and buffers in the Crown land that surrounds both those areas. So that's one question. And the other one that ties into this kind of similarly is that in regards to dealing with the forestry, when I've got concerns in those same areas where there's going to be block logging done up in the watersheds, which is causing further issue in regards to, you know, the depletion of water too quick, creating flooding, and then creating fire hazard in the future. I'm wondering how these things all work together, and how can I educate myself better on those. Thank you.
Well, I could, Dan, if you don't mind, I'll try an answer to that. There are a couple of really difficult questions there. I guess the first one around the Area G and the communities of Headley and others, and how you can encourage support for their Fire Smart groups. I guess the first thing I would do is just point out that FESBC does provide a communications facility for Fire Smart. You can, through our website, apply for materials that can be distributed through your local fire groups or through your community contacts. And that helps just to get the basic information out as to what you can do under a Fire Smart program. So we're a distributor of that information, and we can certainly provide that to you. And it's easy for your public and or your governments to reach out to us and get that information directly as to how to get that. That's the easy answer. The harder one is a much more complex conversation around how do we, what our thoughts are, how you can get more informed on the multiple impacts of forestry and other resources in your area and how that pertains to water. I am not an expert on cumulative impacts analysis, so I can't really provide you that level of detail. But I can say that where FES is involved, we follow the guidance of the land manager in Crown Land. That's typically the district manager of the Ministry of Forests lands. And so on that basis, we do all of our work through authorizations provided by the province. And so one would think that they have had the knowledge and or the review process to ensure that the cumulative impacts are being looked at and considered in terms of their applications that they're receiving.
And I can't give too, yeah, and there's not too much more I can contribute. I definitely support Dave, but I think it's the example of the partnerships that FESBC and HCTF have. For example, we looking at the wildlife impacts of different Crown Land forest harvest techniques, and like I say, it just needs to connect that now on the water side, and I think sort of the partnering is sort of a key part of that, and that's, like you say, that's a critical aspect of it. Like as you mentioned, both sides of that, the flooding and the future fire hazards too. So that's just a comment on that. Yeah.
Any further questions? Okay, seeing none, thank you, Dave and Dan. It was awesome. I believe that's the end of our Environment and Infrastructure Committee meeting. Somebody move adjournment? Okay, we're adjourned.
Very good.
Great. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We're going to go to Chair Pendergraft for Planning and Development Committee.
Okay, we'll call the Planning and Development Committee meeting to order. Looking for a motion on the agenda. Moved, seconded, thank you. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. We just have the one item to deal with OK Falls Economic Development, and we have a delegation. Is Brad Dollybutt, oh, stranger.
Hello, everyone. I'll just try to share my screen here. Hold on one second.
Sure.
Okay, can everyone see my slides?
Yes.
Okay, great. So it's a pleasure to be in front of you this morning and to be able to represent the Okanagan Falls Community Association and the regional district on this exciting plan for the community of Okanagan Falls. This is an economic development and recovery plan. It's a 3-year work plan for the community of OK Falls. That has targeted actions to try to move the community forward on its economic development goals over the next 3 years. So just a brief overview of what I'll be talking about today. This plan primarily is a call to action to do things differently within the community of OK Falls. And it's a call to action not just for the RDOS, but all of the community stakeholders within OK Falls, and the community associations, the most recent association with the Okanagan Falls Community Association that's been formed last year, and the Irrigation District is another large player in the community, to all come and start moving in the same direction on the economic development goals of the community. Just some background, the community has been experiencing, and I'm sure it's no surprise to anyone in the room, a stable and slow decline that's been happening over a number of years within the community economically. And this was happening before COVID-19. Most recently, the symptom of that decline was the loss of the IGA grocery store in the community that happened in September of last year. And what the community has found is that COVID-19 has just kind of exacerbated the issues within the community for the small businesses that are located there. So there's definitely an impetus to do things differently. To create a plan, and RDOS partnered with the Okanagan Falls Community Association at the start of this year. The RDOS also needed a work plan for the ECDEV staff that are located in OK Falls. So there was kind of multiple reasons for the partnering on developing a plan. The RDOS worked with the Community Association in completing the plan that's before you today. Some strategic planning exercises were utilized with the Okanagan Falls Community Association as a public representative community or organization of the community, such as SWOT analysis and as well identification of additional, maybe more structural barriers that are inherent to the community. And then from that SWOT analysis, 7 overarching goals were developed, which I'll get into. And then for each one of those goals, there was a number of actions and a time frame for each of the action items and an applicable agency lead, whether it is the RDOS or the Okanagan Falls Community Association or even another jurisdiction like Ministry of Transportation is identified as having interest in a specific action. And all items are expected to be completed, at least the fixed items, by fall of 2022, so only 2.5 years from now. So plan process, like I mentioned, started this year, and there was a number of engagement sessions held with the Okanagan Falls Community Association from January to May of this past year. And a plan was ultimately finalized by the Okanagan Falls Community Association in June. Just to back up a bit, the Community Association also completed in February on its own a resident survey of the community, which had pretty decent response rate. It had 200 surveys filled out and completed by the community, which represents about 10% of the population. And I'm going to get into a bit of the results of that survey. And then I just want to mention too, once the plan was finalized by OFCA, it was provided to RDOS, and RDOS senior management team as well provided some input and some changes to the plan before it was presented to the board today. So just some background items. I mentioned the survey that was completed in February. They asked a number of questions, but I pulled out just one question for the board's benefit. Is question 3, how would you rate community life in Okanagan Falls? And the respondents were asked from a rating from 1 to 10 to rate their perspective of community life in OK Falls as a place to retire, as a place to raise a family, as a place to start a business, and overall as well. And the feedback there is provided in the orange bar. This results were also compared to a survey that was completed by the RDOS in 2017, which asked a very similar question, which was the RDOS Citizen Satisfaction Survey. And you can see that the perceptions in the community overall as a place to retire and as a place to raise a family have declined significantly over only a short time period, over 3 years. Although there was no similar question asked as a place to start a business, a 4.2 out of 10 rating kind of indicates that the perception of the economic vitality of the community is strained within the community if that's the overall score. So I mentioned we, with the Okanagan Falls Community Association, completed a SWOT analysis. For those that don't know, SWOT means strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And the feedback from the community association was grouped into themes, which are listed there. I'm not going to go into each one, but are provided here for the board's benefit. Each one of these themes were reviewed and tried to be incorporated into the goals that we'll get into. The goal, a lot of the goal planning was trying to build on the strengths of the community, trying to address the weaknesses, and then trying to capture and take advantage of the opportunities that the community can see ahead. So I mentioned we had another second part of strategic planning exercise to kind of talk a bit more about what are some of the larger obstacles to economic growth within the community that are perhaps a little bit more structural and we may need to plan around. We may not be able to change. And so I just listed some of the feedback that was provided by the Okanagan Falls Community Association. Community apathy has been something that's historically kind of been in the community, but I think that is changing now a bit with the Okanagan Falls Community Association and the work that they are doing. The infrastructure upgrades are a significant barrier and obstacle. The irrigation district water system is not up to a sufficient standard for fire flow protection to encourage new development within the community. So that's a concern. As well, the RDOS senior management team mentioned that the sewer mains as well are in need of replacement within the community. And so there's a need for a lot of capital investment for these systems. Regional district governance system was brought up by the community, and despite the areas splitting of Area D and Area I, that they still feel there's a lack of representation on the regional district board, with having only one member from the community represent the interests of a total of 19 members, given their concerns. Access to funding was another one, and also not too surprising for a lot of the electoral area directors, probably was the Modi road right-of-way jurisdiction being an area of concern as well, especially in a semi-urban environment like OK Falls, where sidewalk maintenance, street lighting, improving the street corridors is probably a more importance than a rural area, and that the community definitely feels that lack of upkeep and maintenance within the road corridors. So the review conclusions. Like I mentioned from the survey, perceptions have declined and significantly in the last few years. And so there's a need to plan away from that and to create a new plan for the community to move forward. And that's the goals of this plan. In the literature review, downtown vibrancy, I'm sure no one's surprised if you've driven through OK Falls, is an ongoing concern. And there's been a lot of past planning done on the downtown, a lot of goals and action planning for the downtown area, but the community feels that there hasn't been a lot of results or tangible actions on the ground for the downtown environment. And so that's hopefully trying to be addressed within this plan. And then just in general, in the literature review, it's quite obvious that there's been a lot of planning processes within the community within a short time period. And the members of the Okanagan Falls Community Association mentioned that the community is suffering from planning fatigue, of doing a lot of these planning processes, but not seeing things change within the community. So definitely the goal of this plan as well is to encourage more implementation and less future planning projects. So getting into the goals and actions, I'm not going to go into each one of the actions, but goal number one was an attractive community for young families. The Okanagan Falls Community Association recognized that the OK Falls has got a tremendous amount of opportunity, amenities that they can capture and market better to young families. Especially now within a COVID context, there's I'm sure like a lot of other jurisdictions are strategizing on trying to capture more people within the community because of the larger lots, the access to recreational amenities within the community. As well, OK Falls is fairly affordable for housing, so it's definitely an avenue for potential growth is trying to target young families within the community. Goal number 2, continue business support through recovery. To support the existing business community that's still there. There's a number of actions identified, as well as to try to attract some new businesses. There is some action items with regards to like a new grocery store as being of paramount importance for the community, to try to attract a new one, and also trying to create some more campaigns for business attraction to come to the community. So that's related in this goal. Goal number 3 was to understand infrastructure challenges and plan for the future. I mentioned OFID and their concerns with the water system in the community. They are doing their own analysis as to what upgrades may be required right now, and may need support from the RDOS as well as from the community association and other associations in completing that plan. RDOS as well mentioned the need to do a sewer master plan for the community, so that's incorporated in this plan. Goal number 4, informed discussion on incorporation. There's a lot of talk within the community, and there still is a lot of talk with regards to the prospect of incorporation. The idea behind this goal is to just shed more light on the community as to what that may mean for them if they were to go through the process of incorporation. What are the costs and benefits of doing that? And to hire a consultant to do an analysis of what that may mean for the residents to go forward with that process, so that there's not as much speculation on the positives and negatives that's currently going on in the community right now. Goal number 5 was to develop a brand and to build a tourism destination. Definitely, OK Falls has a lot of tremendous tourism assets that the community can take advantage of. The wineries are often mentioned. They've got fantastic wineries, and the winery association there is also quite active and is doing a good job of promoting itself. So taking advantage of kind of their momentum has been talked about for the larger community. There's a need for a consistent brand for the community, and that's kind of some of the actions coming out of this plan. And also to complete a refresh of the community websites, which are in dire need to be updated to present a consistent brand for the community to the external public. Goal number 6 was downtown improvement and beautification. Like I mentioned, there's been a lack of focus on the downtown. It's been a side piece of a lot of past planning projects, but the intent of this goal is to be specific to the downtown area. Some ideas here is to create a downtown improvement association made up of the downtown business community to work on downtown revitalization initiatives. But also maybe more of topic for the RDOS was the consideration of a downtown improvement service area, just to provide some seed funding to the community to move forward with different downtown initiatives to try to revitalize the downtown area as a potential for consideration for the board. And then last goal here, goal number 7, was to build on community amenities. And the intent here of this goal is to basically take the amenities that are fantastic already within the community, the park system, the school, the other recreational amenities within the community, and to think about how we can best tie those amenities into some of the other goals, such as tourism development and attraction of young families. RDOS has done a lot of work and should be given a lot of credit for the park system that's there today. The actions within this plan, or in this goal, are kind of more targeted on how we can kind of move the amenities into the next level to really take advantage of the family attraction and tourism development for the community. Last slide here is results and measurements. So a key goal of this plan too is to have some tangible items completed within the next 3 years. And so there's some target dates provided for all of the action items. As you can see here, split between 2020, 2021, and 2022. There's a need as well to incorporate this action planning process within the larger strategic planning process of the RDOS board for many of these items to come to fruition for the community. So my hope is that the RDOS, as well as the other organizations within the community, start actively working towards these action items over the next 3 years, and to try to move the community forward on its economic development goals. And that's it. I can take any questions.
Okay, thank you for the presentation. Any questions? I would assume. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. And as the director of the area where this work was done, I want to say a very big thank you to Mr. Dolivet for excellent work done, both as RDOS staff and then afterwards as the consultant who finished this work. I want to thank Chair, or I should say CAO, Bill Newell, for his support in helping us find the budget to help Mr. Dolivet finish this work. There's a long story here that goes back a lot of years, and I'd like to encourage every member of the board who've been too busy to read the report perhaps so far, to please, if you haven't already done so, read the report. It's excellent. It speaks to real important issues in our community. Mr. Dolivet spoke about planning fatigue. In our community, I have spoken about the idea that vision without action is a daydream. Action without vision is a nightmare. What this plan does for us is it outlines both vision and an action plan. And for that, I thank Mr. Dolivet. It's action, action, action. That's where the community is. When we look at history, we have lots of leadership in the community. We have the Legion, the Housing Society started in 1987 with the then president of the Legion, Ed Finlater. He's still a member of the community and still a leader. We have the Irrigation District with fine members who are leaders. We have the South Skaha Housing Society and a lot of leadership there, resulting in a housing project that the ribbon cutting was October 3rd, 2019, and a very, these are all positive steps forward. Recently, in the last year or so, the flea market site sold to a developer who's interested in putting in housing or a hotel. We've got the Suniva site, 114 acres, just closed to a developer with interest out of the Lower Mainland and putting in, and some of these opportunities are highlighted in the report. So I want to say a big thank you, and I do want to move the administrative recommendation that this plan become a guiding document for us going forward, and further, I think it's the foundation stone. As I spoke at last year's strategic planning, this was work that was begun last year, and it is work that forms our foundation stone for our budget process that's about to begin, and action and part of our strategic planning process going forward. So again, a big thank you, and I make the motion for the administrative recommendation. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Director Olbrich. Is there a seconder for that, just to get it on the floor and we'll continue? Okay, seconded, thanks. One more question, Director Monteith.
To the chair, I also want to thank Mr. Dolivet. An amazing document. I grew up in Okanagan Falls, and it definitely captured what I've seen since the 80s. It's a definite full document, a complete document, which is very professionally done. So I thank you. I guess my question is maybe for Director Olbrich. How do we make sure this document moves forward? Like I see so many manuals and opportunities being presented, but they don't come with that action plan. How do we ensure that this moves forward with action? How do we make sure that things are budgeted for Area D to be able to support these projects, that these goals that are definitely needed by the community, and making sure that we have I guess, board support in this, because Okanagan Falls definitely does need some support from the board. And I mean, Director Olbrich has mentioned many times at the board table, and I guess this document sort of proves where he's at and what he's been voicing. So I guess looking for ideas and making sure that this project does continue.
Okay. You want to respond to that, Director Olbrich?
Yes, thank you very much to Director Monteith, and just a great question. And as I alluded to a moment ago, I'd like to, after this comes out of committee, we should bring it to the board and have it put forth as a board motion. The board could show support, and we can get it as a stepping stone to strategic planning. I think everything in here can go on the strategic planning list instantly. I'll have other things to add this year to that list of requests from our area. But more importantly, and historically, there's many of us in the community. The Winery Association, another example of leadership. Community Association, Stratus, Matt Taylor, the president of the Community Association. Community Association itself, Okanagan Falls Community Association, has very fine people, done a lot of work. And I think how we go forward, some of you may recall that we had an economic development bylaw from 2008 that was a beginning of some of this process. I spoke in the first month of being elected to the importance of keeping the Okanagan Falls office open. We did that. We had excellent staff in there. Recently, we lost Robin Irwin. She's moved on to bigger and better things, but she's still in the community. We have successfully recruited her to continue as a volunteer in that process. And we have staff in that office. The job descriptions and the authority under planning, all those things were done with a view towards this action, this implementation. When we go through the action plans, that I hope for support from staff, of course, and the staff in that office specifically, but the staff at the RDOS Martin Street as well, and planning and public works and these other departments, legislative services, of course, and community services as well. And I think with support from staff moving forward and support from the board moving forward, the action list that's set out here, which is important and achievable. Many of these items will be achievable. We can deliver tangible, measurable, quantifiable results. And that long history of the disconnect between the talking and the planning or the dreaming or the vision, maybe we can get some action so that we can deliver. And as a board, I ask every board member, again, I'll make the invitation. Anybody who wants a tour of the area, I'll give it. I'm happy to do so. I know some of you have taken me up on the offer before, and I thank each of you. And I'll do the same with staff. I want to thank again CAO Bill Newell. He's come out with me twice. I think it's been productive. I'm very grateful. And again, to the chair, I'll make the invitation. I'd love if you'd come and take an interest in our area. We are the board of governance of this area. And when we see years and sometimes decades of concern and the community response of disappointment in failure to deliver on action, I think it opens for all of us an exciting opportunity. Things are happening in Area D right now. They're happening. There's a paradigm shift. There's a shift in the attitude in the community. I have expressed those concerns at this board table. I'll continue to do so. Some of the issues are difficult for our municipal appointed members. I remember Vice Chair Director Holmes in June of 2019 on the Modi issue, say, if it's not a problem, why fix it? And from a municipal perspective, the municipalities don't have the same experience, and it's understandable they wouldn't see the issue the same way. But I would welcome all the municipal members, all of them. If you want to talk, I'll share with you the details in this report. I know them intimately, from IGA to Modi to the Astor on the Beach. These are all things that need attention in Area D, and I will ask for this to come back at the board level for support and approval and to strategic planning and for action. I know that's a long-winded answer to Director Monteith's question, but I felt the question was leading a little bit, and I thank you for the help. I felt your assistance, and you I know care about our area maybe more than any other member of this board, because you grew up there and you know it, it's intimate to you. I understand that, and that gives you a unique perspective, which I value and appreciate so much. So again, thank you to Director Monteith.
Okay, a question, Director Kazakovich.
Thank you. Just not a question, just a suggestion. I believe I read in your report, Brad, that Okanagan Falls is looking at doing a marketing approach for their school to enhance, getting families to come to the area and children to get into the school. And maybe I misread, it was a little while ago I read this report, but just we did that in Area E for Naramata about 7 years ago through the Parent Advisory Committee. We did a marketing document that promoted the community, and it was distributed to the different real estate firms throughout the regional district to use to promote Naramata. And at the time we did that, we were down to about 65 students and then got up to about 99 students. So if you're looking for a document to have a look at, I'd be happy to dig that up and share that with you and Director O'Rourke.
Okay.
That's great.
Good,
Thank you.
Sure. I'll go to Director Knoll first, and Director Monteith, is that a leftover hand or a new question? Oh, okay, Director Knoll.
Yeah, this might best be directed to CAO Knoll. I was looking at the Modi suggestion there, and we have issues in this area too with Modi and how things progress. And it seems to me we've tried this partnership with Modi before, and they're very resistant to that kind of thing. Can you shed some light on that, Bill? Is this a possibility? Because if so, definitely Area C would be interested in taking a look at the possibilities there.
I don't think the Ministry of Transportation was in opposition. They were in opposition to spending money on it. I think if the regional district offered to pay for the improvement of sidewalks or road rights of way, that we'd be able to, I mean, we've worked well with them on other projects that have used road rights of way. So it's usually for them, it comes down to money, just as it does for any agency. But I think there's opportunity there.
I was more concerned about legislative control on or enforcement control on various things. Thank you.
Oh, well, you're not going to get that.
Okay, any other questions? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Oh,
Sorry,
yes.
thank you so
Go ahead.
much. Just a follow-up question on the Director Knodel question. When it comes to enforcement authority and those kind of things, does that change with a change in status to municipal status? Do municipalities have a different experience with Modi? And if so, how is that authority, how is that control, enforcement, and relationship different?
Money.
No, not so much for an incorporated community. If they own the roads, then they have that enforcement authority. If they don't, if it's a numbered highway, then it would still be Modi.
So there is a difference, though, between unincorporated and incorporated areas when it comes to those really interesting Modi issues.
Yeah, the province has roads in regional districts, and incorporated communities own their own roads.
Yeah, that's the biggest difference for
Yeah.
sure. Okay, thanks, Mr. Dollybutt, for the presentation. We do have a motion on the floor here. Any other questions on it or discussion? Otherwise, I'll call the question. Seeing none, all in favor? Lots of hands up. If you could take the hands down. Opposed? Motion carries. And with that, we'll call adjournment. Thank you. And just on time. Well done.
Well done.
Amazing.
Yeah. And that clock on the wall is slow.
Oh,
So we are bang on time at 10 a.m. Okay, so I'm just going to have, did we get Judy, Director Judy Sentis?
She's working
She was,
with her IT.
she was on and then something happened?
Yeah,
Okay.
they're working on it.
All right, just having a look here.
Just a side question. A lot of those goals are good. I'm just wondering, is there anything that's got like dollar figures that you can,
well, we're gonna work on
is that the
budget.
next step?
Yeah, and you know, we need infrastructure support from provincial governments and post-COVID and a lot of the stuff like, well,
water,
Okay,
we don't
so
get local
once we get
control.
started,
I'm just
we
thinking
have no
in
idea
terms
about
of when it
you.
comes to budget, which is
They're working
not
on it.
off.
Offered at some point.
But
You need to know
Director Mullen
how
has
much you
come on the line.
And,
set aside to
okay.
accomplish that.
And
As a
is
community
Christy
member
as
who's
well,
not
Teddy?
leaving the community, John
Yes,
Kirby,
she's on too. I
who's
see
going
both
to
of them.
engage,
Okay,
maybe let
great.
alone to get
That's,
others
that's
involved.
key because.
Okay, directors, we're going to get started, please. Good morning, directors. A couple things before we adopt the agenda. I would like to welcome Director Katie Robinson, who is replacing Director Kimberly. So Director Robinson has been appointed to the board. Welcome, Katie. And the board and staff do continue to send our hopes for a speedy recovery to Director Jake Kimberly. And also I'd like to welcome alternate Director Judy Santos, who is filling in for Director Vasilaki today. And Judy is having some technical difficulties, so she's popped in and out of the meeting, and I hope we get her popping back in the near future. On behalf of the board and staff, I'd like to offer sincere condolences to Director Vasilaki and Barbara, his wife Barbara, and family on the passing of Mama Vasilaki. Also, I would like a couple things to remind everyone of. Looking at the screen, we often see a large number, if not half of the board of directors who are blank. They've blanked out their screens, which is fine to do occasionally, but sometimes we're seeing it for very extended periods of time, and we're not even sure if you're there, or when voting is occurring, if you're voting. So just a reminder that it'd be great that we treat the video meetings the same as a board meeting. So you're in the room, you're in the room. If you have to leave, then blank out, please. Also, a reminder that we are live streaming this meeting. So live stream. Wow, who is that? Okay, we are live streaming and we archive the videos of these meetings to the RDOS website for hours of enjoyment at a later time. You can, if you're looking for something to do that's fun and informative this weekend, you could binge watch our videos. Okay, so going to our agenda, folks, we are going to do one addition to the agenda, that's F2, and that is the Declaration of State of Local Emergency Approval. So we will be adding that at F2. Having a look at your agenda, is there anything you'd like to remove from the consent agenda? Now is your only opportunity to do so. Please raise your hand if you want anything removed. Okay, I'm therefore looking for a motion to approve the agenda as amended. Moved by Director Oberick, seconded by Director Bloomfield. All in favor? Thank you. And if hands can come down. And I'm looking for a motion to approve the consent agenda corporate issues. Moved by Director Bush and Director Knodel. Thank you. All in favor? Thank you. Hands can come down. And anybody opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. That takes us to B, delegations. B1 is a delegation from Dr. Kent Mullenix and Christy Tadeby from Kwantlen Polytechnic University. They have presented to our board previously, and we're going to receive an update from them on agricultural opportunities for sustainable economic and community development. Welcome to the board, Kent and Christy. Thank you for being with us today. And which one of you is going to be presenting the slides to us?
That will be me, Christy, and I think I've shared my screen. Are you able to see the information there?
Yes, we have your screen up in front of us, so please go ahead, Christy.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much again to the chair and all of the directors for inviting us to update you today on a project which has been ongoing for a couple of years. Before we begin, oops, yeah, there we go. Before we begin, I'd just like to acknowledge the traditional territory of the Syilx Okanagan Nation and express our gratitude at our collaborators from the Okanagan Nation Alliance that we are continuing to work with on this project. So for those of you who I haven't met yet over the last couple of years, my name is Christy Tataby. I'm a research associate with Polytechnic University's Institute for Sustainable Food Systems. And the ISFS is an applied research and extension unit investigating and supporting regional food systems as key elements of sustainable communities. And the research group is based down in Richmond, but I live and work in Area F here on the West Coast of Kensington. And we're a multidisciplinary team. I'm a planner. We also have dietitians, agronomists, natural resource folks, economists working on food system issues. I'd also like to acknowledge my director, Dr. Ken Molyneux, I believe is joining us today as well, who's here to help answer any questions at the end of the presentation, and my colleagues that are probably joining us on the live stream as well. There's about 14 of us working on this project. So for those of you who weren't around at the beginning of this project, I'll just give a little bit of history as to our relationship with the RDOS and our work on this project. So back in January of 2017, Dr. Molyneux was invited to delegate to the board on the topic of regional sustainable food systems, and that was at the request of the then Okanagan Snoqualmie Healthy Living Coalition. And so that delegation and presentation was given. And that kind of set the ball rolling in terms of building support for investigating regional food systems in the Okanagan region, including the RDOF. And so we, over the next year and a bit, built support for the project and were successful in getting funding from the Real Estate BC to start up the project in May of 2020. And it was conceived as a 2-year project at that time, through to May of this year. And after the project was started, we then applied for a regional grant and aid at the RDOS in August of 2018, and we received 2 consecutive grants and aid from the board, totaling $50,000, $55,000 each year. So the second year of that has just wrapped up last month. And as I mentioned, it was initially conceived of as a 2-year project. We've increased the scope of the project somewhat by adding a few components. And then with COVID and everything, the timeline has gotten pushed out by about 6 months. So we're looking to finalize and wrap up the project at the end of this year. In addition to the RDOS, our funders, I mentioned the Real Estate Foundation as well as the other major funder. We've also received funding from the Regional District of North Okanagan, the Social Okanagan Foundation, and Interior Health as well, their Community Food Action Initiative. Interior Health is also a project partner, as well as the Okanagan Basin Water Board, a number of different local governments. And we've also been working with organizations like the SOSCP, which was mentioned in your first delegation as well, and colleagues at the UBC Okanagan and Okanagan College. So this is not the first time we've done a project like this. This is the second project of its kind. The first was the Southwest BC Bioregion Food System Design Project, which was a 5-year project to develop the methodology to explore bioregional food systems and model their potential benefits. And that was done in the lower mainland of BC and was kind of where we cut our teeth on doing this. We wanted to take this to the Okanagan at the request of both the Healthy Living Coalition and other stakeholders in the region. And so looking at the Okanagan, when we talk about bioregions, we're talking about areas that share similar topography, plant, animal life, and human culture. And we feel that the regional district governments are kind of the closest scale of government, which gets at the level of the bioregion. And so that's why we've made yourselves and the other regional districts our key government partners on this work. The goals of the project. So we recognize that local governments are often making decisions that affect the food system without really good information about what the potential outcomes of those decisions might be. So the goal is really to provide data-driven information about the potential for regional food systems to increase food self-reliance, contribute to local economic growth and jobs in the region, and to reduce the negative environmental impacts that can come from our food system as well. In addition, this time around, we wanted to take it a step further and add a number of kind of supplementary studies that would flesh out the picture of bioregional food systems a bit more. So one was looking at the post-production or processing business need and opportunity in the region. the potential for social capital development, so that glue that holds our communities together, the social networks, what is the relationship with local food systems and social capital. Policy gaps and avenues for support. So looking at the policy context in the Okanagan and understanding where there might be opportunities to further or better support regional food systems. And then talk a bit more about how the data can actually be useful for decision making. So to take this really from just a research report to something that's hopefully a little more implementable and useful for decision making. So our method is a scenario modeling methodology. Scenarios are data-driven stories which can explore trade-offs between different food system components. And so we ask what-if questions into the future to understand what the potential outcomes of different decisions might be. It's not predictive, so we're not trying to say this is what will happen or should happen, but just what are the impacts of what could happen. So we model the baseline scenario, that's what we have existing currently in our food system, and then we project forward to the year 2050, 30 years in the future, and say what would happen if we made this decision or that decision. And those scenarios were developed based on stakeholder feedback. We had a series of 3 workshops through a project to kind of identify what those priorities were and questions. And then from the outcomes of our model, we can measure a number of different indicators across ecology, economic indicators, and food production type indicators as well. And then, as I mentioned, we've done a number of additional supporting studies, which aren't necessarily model-based, but which help to further flesh out our understanding of regional food systems as they relate to these different factors. One which I didn't mention before was the nutrient management. So looking at what are the sources and potential sources of nutrient pollution as well. How does that all come together in the bioregion? So to date, we've completed all of our background research. We've done a study on institutional procurement in the region, looking at the ability of our local producers to supply public institutions like hospitals and correctional facilities and schools. We've, as I mentioned, our stakeholder workshops. We've done our scenario selection and modeling. Our social capital assessment is complete. We've also incorporated agricultural water requirements into our model, which wasn't there before. We did a farm to restaurant study, which was kind of a local economic development ancillary study, and a post-production study, and we've completed a policy analysis. So what we're still working on is the final nutrient analysis, the critical habitat assessment, just finalizing that. And we're also doing a number of supply and demand case studies for different subbasins in the Okanagan region in terms of water, so to better understand the implications for agriculture at a finer scale. And the economic impact assessment, we're working with a consultant formally with BC Stats to run our model results through their input output model to get our economic indicators. And so what we're, and then all of this information needs to be synthesized into a compelling and readable and understandable format. And so that's what we're working on now is our final summary report. And then there will be also an accompanying series of research briefs, which are the technical briefs that go into detail on each of the different project components. There'll be 8 to 10 of those as well. So all of those should be available hopefully by the end of this year, but realistically probably by the time they're all produced and available, it'll be early in 2021. And at that point, we would return to you and our other stakeholders to present all of the information and answer questions and have a discussion at that point. So I can give you a kind of a brief overview of some of the results to date. Our model is based around food self-reliance. And so when we talk about that, we're referring to the potential of the land base to meet the food need of the people that are actually living there. So in this case, it's looking at the Okanagan bioregion, so the 3 regional districts. And we've measured our current food self-reliance, that's using the 2016 census data, to be 39%. So that means that our land base is supplying 39% of the food that we need to be eating, which means that the remainder is being imported from outside the bioregion. So that's our baseline. If we then look into the future at a business as usual scenario, that's where we have population growth, but no change to our agricultural production. So we produce the same as we were producing in 2016. Intuitively, it drops down to 33% because we have more people and the same land base. So our food self-reliance drops down. But what we can do with our model is a food system or food self-reliance optimized for food self-reliance. So that's where we tell the model, okay, let's reallocate the land base that we have to produce crops that will maximize our food self-reliance. And so when we do that using the same land base, but just changing the crop mix in 2050, we can actually get our food self-reliance up to about 69%. And it's just worth noting that the theoretical maximum food self-reliance that our model works with is 73%, and that's because we assume that people are going to continue eating things like oranges and bananas that we aren't going to produce here. And so there's only a certain amount of our food need that we can actually meet within our bioregion. So you can see that food self-reliance is kind of tied to the amount of land and how you're using that land. But it's worth mentioning that obviously food self-reliance isn't the only goal or objective of the food system. We are also concerned about wildlife habitat and about water use and about these other factors. And so the remaining scenarios start to dig into some of those trade-offs in terms of what happens if we prioritize critical habitat areas, for example, and protecting those, or expanding our land base, our agricultural land base. So those are the kinds of trade-offs that we get into. On the water side, I mentioned we've incorporated agricultural water requirements into our model, and then the supply and demand sub-basin analysis that we're working on looks at stream flow, ecological flows, and it's using the latest 2020 data from the Okanagan Basin Water Board. So that's in the final stages. The post-production sector, when we talk about post-production, we mean the aggregation, processing, and distribution of our primary agricultural products that we're producing here. So how do we turn the apples into apple juice and applesauce, for example, and how do we get it to where it needs to be? We recognize from an economic standpoint, most of the economic benefits from a regionalized food system come from that post-production sector and those activities. And our model assumes that in our food self-reliance calculations that we have the post-production sector in place to be able to convert those primary products into the secondary products that we're consuming. And that's obviously not the case. We know that our post-production sector here doesn't have the capacity to do that at the moment. So this looks at kind of what is needed and what are those key challenges and the required support to help advance that post-production sector, which is essential to a functioning and strong local regional food system. On the social capital side, we have a master's student at UBC Okanagan that's just defending her thesis next week. And she has done a number of, or she's done a survey and a number of interviews of local food system stakeholders in the Okanagan in terms of the relationship between social capital and local food systems. And she did find a strong connection between increased social capital and increased participation in the local food system. I'm not going to go into the details just in the interest of time. On the policy and planning side, so we scanned all of the local government policy that could be related to the food system. So this included high-level comprehensive plans, regional growth strategies, but everything down to zoning bylaws, looking for support for the food system in various different ways. And we found a number of areas where support is strong. For example, protecting our agricultural land. We do a pretty good job of that in our policy. But there were a number of areas that we flagged for further consideration and analysis because of their ability to really move the food system forward, like the post-production sector, which I mentioned, or the notable gap that existed there. So these are summarized in the handout that you got as well. So I won't go into them in detail, but the technical reports will go through each of these areas in detail and present policy precedents from other places and suggestions for moving them forward. And so how do we feel this research could be beneficial? Well, as I mentioned, we hope that the data can provide a better understanding of the decision outcomes that face folks like yourselves that are making decisions at the local government level. It underscores the importance of protecting our agricultural lands if we're concerned about our future food system resilience and ability to feed ourselves. It can also feed into upcoming processes. So I know you have a number of ongoing processes and like OCP reviews or new OCPs that are being drafted. Penticton has a food security strategy that's out for tender right now. And in the central Okanagan, for example, they're looking at doing a regional food system plan. So this data can be a good starting point for processes like that. We hope that it can contribute to local indicator measurement, things like the vital signs reports that the Community Foundation does. And then we hope that the data can help, I guess, make the case for strengthening local and regional system for projects that are ongoing when requesting funding from other levels of government. So, for example, the South Okanagan food processing innovation hub that Summerland is looking at, or when we're looking at waste management and organics recycling and purchasing a landfill to do that, this data can help kind of elucidate why those things are important. In terms of the regional grant and aid update, I said we submitted it in August. It's ready to be submitted, but we're having technical issues just because of the ransomware attack. But it's all ready to go there. The 25,000. So we did submit our report last year. So for the final year of the funding, I don't know if you're probably aware, but the regional grant and aids cannot be used for salaries, which is what the bulk of our expenses on this project are, researcher salaries. So this grant was earmarked for things like printing our final reports and researcher travel, workshops, stakeholder consultation. And a lot of that hasn't happened yet because those happened at the end of the project. And so we've withheld some of the funds for those final distribution and report printing activities. So we anticipate that should be finished in 2020. And we've been corresponding with Mr. Kerbank about this. And I can give you details about that if you want dollar figures, but that will be all in the report, which is forthcoming as well. So with that, I think I've probably gone over my 10 minutes, but we're happy to take any questions, and anything that we can't answer, we can definitely get back to them as well.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for that presentation, Christy. I'll go to the board of directors to see if anybody has any questions or comments. I'll go to Director Bush. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, so I hate to bring this up again, but are you aware of the Parks Canada and the national parks? Because we'd be looking at losing 77,000 acres of food producing land. And to me, this is a big concern for the future residents. I just want to know if you considered this, because I mean, it is all 100% food producing land, whether it's hunting or cattle grazing or fishing or whatever. And it would be a big loss to our community as far as food sustainability. Thank you.
Yeah, we haven't, because we were using the 2016 census data as our baseline, and so our data just reflects what was in production in 2016. It's not something that we've modeled, but we do actually model a series of land loss scenarios, and they're a little more generic in that they look at a 10, 20, or 30% loss over the whole region, the impact that would be. And then we discuss a number of the different potential drivers of land loss, things like urban development or price, in terms of farmland price being inaccessible, or cannabis production, for example, displacing agricultural land. So that is something, while we haven't named the national park, we could perhaps look at that in our narrative, in the land loss narrative. That would be another, I guess, that's what we're getting at with the trade-offs, right? If people are talking about, we want to preserve habitat land, well, that's going to take away from your productive land base. And so what are those impacts? And that's really, we're not trying to tell anyone what the right way forward is, but give a sense of what the impacts of those decisions are. So we haven't directly addressed it, but I think we have talked about the land loss. I don't know if Kent, you wanted to add anything to that.
No, nothing to add, Christy. Thanks. Yeah, we do recognize that land loss has the potential to significantly impact food production. And so our scenarios will present information that you all can use to consider the outcomes of losing land that could be devoted to food production.
Go ahead, Director Rieger.
Thank you, through the chair. Just a question of clarification. When you're talking about agricultural land and the economic value of agriculture, where are the vineyards and wine industry in this? Are they considered food in this review?
So they are not considered food, and we did. This came up many times in our stakeholder workshops, as you can imagine. We were talking, and there's debate. You know, is wine food? And some people would argue that it is, and in the end, we opted to not consider it food, and so it doesn't factor into food self-reliance. We do have a scenario where we look at taking away vineyard land if that were converted to food, so other cropland that's producing food. And so we do explore the potential impact of that. In terms of the economic impact of it, that's something that we would discuss. It won't factor into our scenario model outputs because it's not modeled as a food crop. But obviously there's an opportunity cost there. So if we were to use that vineyard or wine producing land for food producing, we would have an economic impact in terms of the impact of the wine industry. So it's looked at, and no, we don't consider it to be a food. But I know that's up for debate.
Okay, thank you. I'll go to Director Roberts next.
Thank you to the chair. To follow up Director Rieger's, my comment was going to be quite similar, because again, I see the difference, the balance between the vintners and food producing agricultural land. And in the Similkameen here, I'm wondering whether or not, are we as a sub-region? Are we tied into that planning? Because I know at this moment in time, we have probably a greater mix and a balance at the moment of food production versus vintners, and seeing it important to have that balance moving forward, supporting family food farming with the wine industry, and wondering whether or not you're in discussion, or is it just that they have to ask the Agricultural Land Commission? Do you kind of pass on the information that you've collected to them? Because sometimes, they themselves may not have such updated material. And I was happy to hear the information you were bringing up about the balance of eco, for instance, agricultural land in riparian buffer zones to be able to safeguard waterways, et cetera. And I'm assuming from a lot of the stuff that I heard you say in your discussion here that is an importance, and I'm quite excited. And as we move forward in Area G towards looking at a community plan, I definitely want to glean as much from what you've gathered. And again, thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. And through the chair, yeah, it's interesting talking about the wine industry, because we kind of, I think, assumed that we see vineyards everywhere going to be a major impact on our food self-reliance, that is going to wine and not to food. When we actually model it out, we're looking at local food self-reliance, and so we also looked at the impact of export-oriented cherry production in the North Okanagan, for example. It's a food, but it's not actually being produced for people in the region, and so the cherry and apple industries, export cherry and apple industries, actually have a greater land area than the area of vineyards in the region. And so the other thing that we're blessed with here in the Okanagan is we have a relatively low population for the size of our land base compared to, say, the Lower Mainland where we were working before. And so we actually can kind of have our cake and eat it too, in terms of being able to balance, as you said, the food production, family farming, with the thriving wine industry, I think. That said, we recognize that there's a number of uncertainties and changes in the future with climate change and things that might be coming. And so being able to produce food might become, the value of that may shift, I guess, in relation to the value of being able to produce wine. And I think COVID kind of woke a lot of people up to the importance of having a local supply chain that's resilient and robust. And so, yeah, but that's an interesting point, is that I think a balance can be struck, and that's what the numbers are showing. But then there are trade-offs, right? but there's trade-offs in both ways. So we're, in terms of being able to use our information and passing it on, all of this will be publicly available. So we make all of our reports available on the website. And we're happy to do as many delegations and presentations to folks that are interested to share the data and answer questions that way, as well, to make sure that it's useful. On the habitat side of things, yes, you're right. Critical habitat came out really strongly as a really important value in the food system when we talked to stakeholders. And the Okanagan, as you're all aware, has a lot of really high value habitat and red and blue listed species. And that's where working with the SOSCP was important to make sure that those habitat areas were factored in. And so one of our scenarios does look at what if we were to exclude all of the prime habitat and the critical habitat from agricultural production. So those areas that are currently on agricultural land, let's say we set them aside and we don't produce on them. That has a pretty big impact as well because it's a significant area of land. But those are the kinds of trade-offs that we can clarify and bring to light through this process.
Okay, thank you. Director Bloomfield, did you still have your hand up for a question? Or are you okay?
Yeah, I part of my question, or one of my questions, has already been answered with the vineyard versus food production, and I think that was covered off quite well. But I'm wondering, Christy, how you see, bringing that crop mix back. Are there any actionable ways of doing that, and in reducing or limiting the amount of vineyards? Is that something that you're alluding to in your presentation? And also, how do you see the fruit co-ops affecting the food production here? Because the fruit co-ops, a lot of the fruit that goes through the co-ops actually goes for export or goes out of the area. And I wondered what your thoughts were on those co-ops and how they could change or improve. Thank you.
Certainly. In terms of how to bring the crop mix back or to regain that balance, I guess that's not something that that our policy review identified or has looked at. And I don't think we have done a lot of work on what those next steps are. I think it would, and I think I'm going to turn this over to Kent shortly, because I'm sure he'll have some thoughts and ideas too. But I think that's really the purview of local government, is to think about what is our role in terms of directing this, and how does that fit in with the market, and how do we safeguard our future food self-reliance, and in terms of our ability to make decisions. And the co-ops question, I'm also going to turn over to Kent. Kent does have a background in apple production, so he might, or palm fruit production, so he might have some thoughts as well.
Yeah. So yes, through the chair, it's not the objective of this study to bring forth recommendations to achieve your all's preferred food system future, but to generate the information that you need to make informed and thoughtful decisions regarding your food system future in terms of community and economic development and environmental stewardship. And we hope that the study will indeed provide valuable information for you all to do that. We will be engaging in a study in the Okanagan in subsequent years. And in fact, we've been funded for this to work with local governments and planners and community leaders to use this information to discuss, calculate how the Okanagan bioregion can effectively move forward to bring forth an appropriate balance between all the food system and economic interests to better advance resiliency in the future. And we'll share more about that project with you in the months ahead, but we're ways away from that. Certainly the tree fruit industry, which we interact with a great deal, is facing significant challenges as it participates in the global apple market, and we believe that alternate economic strategies, or at least I believe that alternate economic strategies hold the promise of bringing vitality to the apple sector. And further, I believe that is an important objective because there are few areas of the world better suited to apple production than is Canada's Okanagan. And it is a shame to lose the capacity of the Okanagan to grow and provide apples for Canada. So I think the cooperatives have a significant role to play to revitalize or assure the vitality of the Okanagan apple sector, and we're working with the BC Tree Fruit Growers Association to advance that.
Just if I could add one more point further to Director Bloomfield's question, the first question. I think this is a pretty high-level study that provides some overall data at the regional scale. But then there's the opportunity for follow-up studies like the City of Penticton's food security strategy or food system plan to really dig into what are the goals for the individual regions based on stakeholder input and the community-specific data to identify what the next steps are. So I think that this provides a jumping-off point, but that further detailed planning work and consultation with the community is needed to identify that preferred future and how to get there. So those further studies like that will help, I think, clarify your question.
Okay. Thank you very much, Christy. I'm seeing a few more questions and then we need to move on. I'll go to Director Knodel.
Thank you very much. These studies are absolutely important to our farming industry. One of my big concerns is the loss of our small farms, which are being basically the regulations are starting to push them to a point where they're non-profitable. And as we lose our small farms, we lose our diversities. We've also lost any ability to, by scale, economy of scale, to produce products that can be not so much produce products, but to process product in the form of canning or freezing or processing food. And I'm just wondering if you have any suggestions that would help us out in that, in light of these things. Our small farms are desperate for outlets that provide a better and more stable income. The problem facing apples and all fruits is that the costs to produce are getting very close to the costs that they can garner from the product, and that's pushing us more and more towards these large-scale farms, which go to one product only. If you have any suggestions there, we'd definitely be interested in hearing them. Thank you.
Welcome. My colleague is the one that is doing the post-production study, and as you mentioned, that's absolutely critical to the economic vitality of the sector moving forward. And so she's looked at a series of different typologies for what post-production facilities and I guess facilities and programs which support small-scale farms could look like, and a discussion of what's needed to get them there. I myself don't actually have that information at my fingertips, but that will be detailed in one of the technical briefs. And if you like, I can ask her if she has kind of a back of the envelope response to your question. Kent might want to jump in there as well.
Your counselor, your director, your point is well taken. The economic environment that smaller scale family farms operate in today is very, very challenging. And indeed, apple farmers are likely not to receive sufficient proceeds from the sale of their crop to cover costs. That's a consistent problem, which is why they struggle. And it seems unlikely that there's going to be any ability to alter the global apple market in the Okanagan apple industry's favor. And so what that implies is that it's incumbent upon the sector and for local and provincial government and to support the Okanagan apple industry pursuing alternate value chains and marketing strategies, which I believe absolutely exist. And in fact, there's the social economic environment to develop those channels and confer a significant profitability on the apple sector, and in particular smaller scale family apple producers. But certainly, in my opinion, seeking to play the same game and expect different outcomes is probably not a viable approach. So some new thinking needs to be brought in, and new approaches to marketing Okanagan apples via the creation of value chains needs to be pursued.
And I might add as well that our policy analysis does cover post-production as one of the kind of gap areas or areas for future consideration. And so we look at things like agricultural enterprise zoning that exist other places that are very applicable to the local government level and jurisdiction that can help to kind of revitalize the processing sector in support of small-scale local farms. So that will all be in the final report as well.
Okay, thank you very much. We do need to move on. Director Roberts, did you have a final question, or was that a leftover hand?
Yeah, to the chair, just a quick question. I'm wondering whether or not a part of the discussion that was just stated and a follow-up of Director Knodel, is it part of that discussion that we have at local government dealing with the Agricultural Land Commission in regards to rules and regulations, as well as the other food, Canada's food agencies? Because again, the smaller farms with the ability or the need to have small-scale value-added farming, to be able to do productions and stuff. And like, for instance, I was just eating last night at Row 14, which we really enjoy, the farm to table. But of course, their goal was to have a farm to table restaurant in their farm, but they ended up having to build a cidery just so they could have alcohol. You know, we have a lot of strange rules, and I'm hoping as we move forward, we look for those solutions. The last question I had really was, as we're seeing, or I'm seeing in Area G, I'm wondering whether or not in the Okanagan, you're seeing an increase in the proliferation of privately owned packing houses. We're getting to the place now we've got quite a few of them. We see a decrease in the co-op as it stands, and now these large production and packing houses that a lot of times even fruit and goods are coming from other regions going there and being processed elsewhere. Is that something that you're also seeing in the Okanagan?
I can't speak to that directly. I think it probably has been happening more in your region as a major fruit production region down there. I don't know, Kent, if you have any more information on that.
Yes, through the chair. This was not a focus of this study, But as I said, we are increasingly working with the BC Tree Fruit Growers Association and starting to support the association and the Okanagan apple sector to examine these kinds of things and come to better understand where the potentials and what the strategy should be to actualize those potentials to bring economic vitality to the Okanagan apple sector. And yeah, I understand that cooperative fruit packing is taking a hit and struggling, but there are those that believe, as do I, that the cooperative post-production sector can and will play an important role in the Okanagan's apple sector future. But we got to figure out the environment for that to be.
Thank you very much, Kent and Christy. So your report today was for information only, and my understanding is from your timelines that we will see a final report. Would that be December this year or into early next year? Is that correct?
That's correct, yeah. We can continue to be in touch about the exact dates for that, but we will provide all of the information and be back for more questions and discussion at that point.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much. We look forward to that final report, and thank you, Christy and Kent, for being with us this morning, and we will be talking to you again in the future.
That's good. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye now. Okay, directors, that moves us on to section C, Development Services, Rural Land Use Matters. C1, request to resubmit a refused temporary use permit application in Area A, CAO.
Thanks, Madam Chair. At the July 2nd meeting of the Board of Directors, we had an application before you for a temporary use permit for a property adjacent to Osoyoos with the purpose of it being a vacation rental. And at that point in time, the application was denied. We have a section of our development procedures bylaw that says an application cannot return once being denied for a period of 12 months. But there is also another section of the bylaw that allows for an appeal to the board to have that section waived. So this is what is before you today. It's not the discussion at this point on whether the application should be approved. It is whether the board will allow the application to come back by exempting that section
We need to clear Christy's connection, Christy Tataby's connection off. That's where we're getting, there we go. Thank you. Go ahead.
So that is the discussion today, is to whether you will waive section, I believe it's 3.12.1 of the procedure bylaw to allow this application to come back, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you very much.
And we're recommending that it not be allowed because we have not received any information different from when the application was first denied.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll go to Director Pendergraft on this.
I would make the staff recommendation, but I believe the motion's actually on the floor from the last meeting when we postponed or deferred until this meeting. So.
I believe it was denied.
No, this came to the last meeting, this same motion, and we couldn't
hear Mr. Law from a technical glitch, so then Director Pendergraft deferred it.
But it is the staff recommended motion.
So same thing.
Correct, so it is on the floor.
Okay.
Right, so excellent, thank you. And so last time, Mr. Law was on the line, but we could not hear him. I believe he tried several times to speak to us. And it looks like he is logged in this time. So I'm going to ask if Mr. Law did want to speak to this denial that's on the floor, to this motion. I see he's unmuted. Go ahead, Mr. Law, let's try this again.
Yes, are you there?
Yes, we can hear you this time. Please go
Oh,
ahead.
you can. Okay. Yes, a previous conversation with Director Mark Pendergraph, he recommended that I reapply with no hold on the, or no wait time for my VROB license. And under the current circumstances, the property is managed by a property maintenance manager. And for us, with the COVID, et cetera, it's the best option for protecting our guests, et cetera. And it seems that anybody coming to the Okanagan, this is something that they prefer. Now, we were rated 4.8 out of 5 as far as accommodations, et cetera, were concerned. I do understand that there was a problem, but that was taken care of. That was last year. There's been no problems this year, or there was no problems this year until we were shut down. So I'm just, wondering if you would take into advisement of a reinstatement of our permit. All the closest neighbors, I went around, petitioned everybody. We had 14 neighbors, and I sent you a list of that, and I think you have a copy there, I'm not sure. But most of them were our closest neighbors, other than Ron Tiefel, who disagreed with it. And the other 1, 2, or 3 that didn't agree, the state had extra traffic on the street, and we don't want to have this in our neighborhood, kind of a thing. So that kind of sets up a precedent for all the other VROBs in town. So if there's anybody that, might have a complaint, next thing you know, we don't have any VROBs. Now, okay, so I was going to say, I've lived in Osoyoos for 52 years, and in my neighborhood, we bought in 1975, but my parents built the house in 1962, so there's nobody more concerned about the neighborhood than I am, based on the fact that I've been there for close to 60 years, I guess. And, we've done an extreme amount of renovations on the property, et cetera. So it's not like the building is old by any means or needs anything like that. And I'm willing to put up some kind of a barrier along the north wall that would alleviate, hopefully, a lot of the sound problems coming. We do have a manager of John Redenbach, and he's putting in noise violations after 11. Anybody that's making noise after 11 will be immediately evicted. So I don't know how you feel about this.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Law. So right now the board is tasked with your reapplication here, your request for us to consider again. And I'm going to ask if the board members have any questions specific to you on this before we move on to debate. So are there any directors? Yeah, are there any directors that have a question for Mr. Law while he is on the line? Taking a look here, I don't see any hands up. I'll ask again.
One other thing I would. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was going to say one other thing that I would like to mention is that times and circumstances change with everybody. So with the current situation of housing prices way down, etc., it doesn't matter who it is. If you're kind of stuck without a job and you got to move, this is a great option as far as maintaining, your mortgage payments, etc. And I don't know. I mean, it just seems to me the best way to go rather than have a full-time tenant. Sometimes you like them, sometimes you don't. But if they're full-time and you don't, then you're kind of stuck anyway. This way here, they're coming and going every 3 days to a week or possibly 2.
Okay, thank you. We see a question here for you, Mr. Law, from Director Robinson. Go ahead, Director Robinson.
Thank you through the chair. I'm just wondering, I don't know what the background to this was and what the original problem was, but I'm wondering if Mr. Law could tell us, was there a property manager in place during the problem time in the past?
I've had a property manager since we
Could I
opened,
just interject here? We're not discussing the merits of the vacation rental and what took place. It's simply whether we're going to allow a reconsideration because a year timeline has not passed. So it's not the merits of the vacation rental at this time. It's whether we are going to allow a reconsideration. Normally there's a 1-year wait.
Yeah.
So that's what the debate is right now. So generally, we look to see if there was a procedural error, which there wasn't, or if there's new information that's come forward since the last application that would merit a reconsideration.
Would
So
a
based on
property
that-
manager, would a property manager in place not be new information?
There is a property manager. He did present to us at the previous board meeting when this was denied.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Anybody have a question specific to Mr. Law on this proposal for a reapplication? Okay, I'm not seeing any hands up here. So thank you, Mr. Law, for presenting to us. We'll now move on to the directors debating this. Are there any comments or questions regarding this? The motion
as far
is
as I'm
on.
concerned.
No, not for you, Mr. Law,
Take him off, Danny.
just for the directors. Okay, directors, do you have any questions or comments? The motion is on the floor from last time still, which is a denial of this reapplication. Okay, Director Obert, go ahead, please.
Yes, thank you. And I just want to add a comment, and I sure do appreciate Mr. Law's remarks and the significance of what and the sincerity of what he wants. With respect to the motion and reducing or varying our 1-year rule, I think in this circumstance, I have to support the motion, the administrative recommendation, and not vary because I was present when the initial matter was reviewed. I thought it was thorough. I thought there was excellent debate and discussion. I don't think it was an easy decision for anybody. And when we look at the reasons why we have this rule and the importance of the cooling off time, the prevent engagement fatigue, I think I'll speak for myself, but I think I'm speaking for many at the board. There was really, really good debate and discussion, and there does not appear to be, to my way of seeing it, any sufficient reason to vary our 1-year rule, which has a real important purpose. So I support the motion, and I wanted to say to Mr. Law, thank you very, very much, because you did an important thing, bringing these concerns to our attention, and I sure appreciate your doing that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Next is Director Bush. Go ahead, please.
Well, I just have concerns about stopping this right away without, I mean, he must have people booked up probably a year in advance. And I just think it's quite a hardship on this owner.
Any further comments or suggestions? Director Pendergraft, go ahead, please.
It kind of forces me to speak to the issue at hand. Is generally when you're going to start a business, you get the permit before you start the business, not after the fact. That's kind of the crux of the issue here, right from the very get-go. It started on the wrong foot, creating issues in the community. If the permit would have been in place, yes, it would be hard to cancel it and leave the person hanging there, but he didn't have the permit to start with. So.
Okay, thank you. I thought I saw Director Monteith's hand. It's come down. It's back up. Go ahead, Director Monteith.
Through the chair. And Director Pendergraft, I fully agree with you. I have the same problem brewing right now in Caledon, where we've got vacation rentals popping up without getting permits first, and neighbors are very unimpressed, and it's not fair to them to not be included in the process. And that's why we have the temporary use permits, so that everybody has that opportunity to have a say before their neighborhood changes. So I agree where this is going.
Okay, thank you very much. Did anybody else have a comment or a question before I call the vote on this? Director Monteith, I think your hand's still left over. Thank you. This is a corporate vote. I'm not seeing any other hands up, so the motion's on the floor still from last time that we not vary section 3.12.1 of the Development Procedures Bylaw. So seeing no other hands up for comments or questions, I'll call the question then. All in favor? Hands are going up. Okay, those hands can come down. And I'm going to call anyone opposed. Director Bush is opposed. Was anybody else? Director Knodl's opposed. And I believe we've got everybody to oppose, so motion carries. Thank you very much. That means we'll go on to C2, zoning bylaw amendment, electoral area A, CAO.
Thanks, Madam Chair. This is the Panhandle lot adjacent to Soyuz Lake, where the property owner wanted to vary some side yards, adding some to the side yard and deleting from the rear yard. And it is back for adoption, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Go to Director Pendergraft on this.
Thanks, Chair. I would move the staff recommendation.
Okay.
To adopt.
Great, and seconded by Director Obrecht. Thank you. Any questions or comments on this one?
This is a rural vote, as is the next one. I'm not sure what happened on our agenda. I think it was to do with, we were working on data sticks, so those two are.
So just a correction, your notes there might say corporate. This is a rural vote only, but open discussion for everybody. Did anybody have a question or comment? Okay, I'm not seeing anything. Rural vote, I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, thank you. Hands can come down. Anybody opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. We'll go to C3, zoning bylaw amendment in area F, CAO.
Yeah, this is for home industry on the Princeton Summerland Road, Madam Chair, with regards to woodworking shop, and we had to put a covenant on with regards to sound diminishment, and this is back for adoption.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'll go to Director Gettens.
Thank you. I'd like to move the administrative recommendation, please.
Okay, thank you. Seconded by Director Bush. Any questions or discussion on this one? I'm not seeing any. This is a rural vote. Call the question. All in favor? And hands can come down. Thank you. Anybody opposed? Motion carries. That takes us down to D, Public Works, D1, Award of Olalla and Naramata Water Main Replacement Project, CAO.
We discussed two projects when we were looking at the ICIP grant applications for this go-around, Madam Chair. One for the Naramata water system to replace some infrastructure, and the other for Olalla, and these are ongoing projects. But in order to get a complete application in, you need to do some pre-work. So this will be for the design of the infrastructure upgrades for Naramata and Olalla water systems. And we want to award that project to Ecora for $100,000, and then a contingency of 10, Madam Chair.
Great, thank you. I'll go to Director Roberts on this one. You're moving it, Director Roberts? I see a hand. I can't hear you though. Director Roberts, you're on mute. Oh,
sorry,
yeah,
very good. There you go. Yes, take staff recommendation. That's correct. Moving
Wonderful, thank you. Is there a seconder? Director Obrecht, thank you very much. Any questions or concerns with this one? This is a corporate vote. I'm assuming Area G and Area E are splitting this cost? right? Yeah, okay. Can't peg it all on Area G? Okay.
No, I thought it was going to your area, sorry.
Okay, I'm not seeing any questions or comments. This is a corporate vote. I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, thank you. Hands can come down. Hands coming down. Okay, anybody opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you. That takes us down to E. Information Services, verbal update. Going to turn that over to Danny.
Madam Chair.
Thank you, Danny. Go ahead.
To the chair, a bit of an update on what's been happening since the attempted cyber attack, I guess 3 or 4 weeks ago. Lost a bit of time here. We do continue to increase services that are available to our staff within the building. That's progressing further and further. We have access to email and mapping and things like that internally now. We are still working on our external connection. We've built up multiple networks here, and there's an isolated network which we have most of our staff now working on. We are working on getting our other municipalities that we've partnered with, as well as some of our remote buildings, onto the system as well, and we'll progress further with that this weekend. The cyber insurance specialists we are still working on are continuing to go through logs and developing a full report of the incident that we'll be able to provide at a future date. At this moment, we still have no new incidences recorded. All of the systems that we've gone through have come up clean, and we are in the process of looking at recovery of some backup drives that have been sent in for analysis. So that's also progressing further. As to when we'll have full operations back and running, that's still an equation that has multiple variables to it, of which I only have control of some of them. So no estimated ETA yet, but we are progressing every week with more and more services. And if there's any quick questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Okay, thank you very much. I see a question from Director Monteith. Go ahead, please.
To the chair, do we know what the financial implications are of this and what it's going to cost us to have everything repaired and up and operational again? Thank you.
We did have and do have cyber insurance, so there will be a deductible that's incurred with that insurance, and other than that, we're still kind of going through that process. There will be some cost, but the insurance does cover a majority of the costs, especially when involve the cyber experts and the recovery of any data that of drives and machines we've sent in.
Okay, thank you. Director Bloomfield, go ahead, please.
Thank you, and through the chair, and Danny, I want to thank you for all the hard work that the guys are putting in, or people are putting in behind the scenes to try and get the system up and running again. The loss of mapping has been particularly difficult for the real estate industry and the engineers, etc. And there's starting to get quite a backlog of real estate transactions that are just getting put on hold because of the lack of the ability to get on the mapping, not only from realtors but also from engineers that are looking for the ESDA and riparian setbacks on various properties. So I'm wondering if there's any kind of guess as to a timeline for when the mapping would get back online for the public use, and if it's going to be a long distance away, then does development services, do they have any alternate suggestions for people looking for that kind of information?
Through the chair, at this moment, we do have internal mapping now active for staff this week, fully active with a temporary solution, working with the RGIS team and with our staff, looking at ways of having that available on the public. We're still examining some scenarios. We hope to have some more information on that in the next coming week.
Okay, so Danny, can folks come in here and access mapping through the front counter? Would that work?
That, yeah, the information is available to our staff, so if they do come into our building, our staff would be able to provide that information from the mapping system.
Okay, thank you.
Or contacting the phone.
Okay, great, thank
How
you.
do we contact them?
Sorry, go ahead, Director Bluefield.
I was going to say, are there any emails up for contacting people, from the public to contact the planning department now?
Yes, we did send out several weeks ago through information releases and to the directors a list of email addresses that are usable by yourselves and the public to reach out to staff in each department. So you should have that list in your inbox. It's in an information.
Is that on the website for the public to see? Because, I can't handle every inquiry, but yeah.
Yeah, it's posted on our website. All our information releases are posted. It has been in the media. I've been keeping tabs on the media. Have been great to post that information, and people have been contacting me by using the info@rdus.bc.ca email addresses, but there's also one per department, and people need to reach out to any of the directors or a certain staff member. If they just put that person's name at the top of the email, it will get passed on to them.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for Danny? Comments? I can say thank you, Danny and his team. They have been working very long hours every weekend. I believe Danny was here till 3:30 last night again, and we need to designate a room with a cot for Danny to sleep in. Not to mention Sean, there was a night he was here till 4 a.m. With the wildfires. So anyways, thank you so much, Danny. I know it's been a lot of work, and we look forward to when everything is fully back to normal.
As do I.
Yes, I'm sure you're looking forward to it as well. Okay, thank you. That takes us on to F, Community Services. F1 is a verbal update on the Christie Mountain wildfire. CAO.
Thanks, Madam Chair. So we are putting together a debriefing on the Christie Mountain fire, and that will happen in the next short while. But we thought for today, we just give you a sort of a chronological sequence and then take questions if there are questions from any of the board members. So Mr. Woods, Mr. Leisler is going to provide that.
Also, I appreciate that. Thank you very much to the CAO. And so our update in the EOC, I actually presented over to the board at our last board meeting, which was a couple of days after the initial wildfire started. So I just want to bring this over to attention here. So on August 18th, our EOC was activated over to respond to this wildfire. So we lasted our EOC, it lasted until August 27th. The RUS EOC through the board declared a state and local emergency and order an alert.
Sorry, Sean. Danny, did you have that chronological document?
Yeah, it'd be better to get it up on the screen.
Just so we can follow along.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, so I can just give the highlights if everybody can just read here. So, so obviously on August 18th, the RUS EOC activated with support of BC Wildfire. RUS EOC supported the site, so the EOC supported the Okanagan Falls Fire Department, which had the authority within the jurisdictional boundaries, and then over with the BC Wildfire Service. So on the 18th, our EOC was staffed up over to a level 2. We brought in staff into the EOC. We set up all of our computers and responded as appropriately. And the EOC overworked with the CAO and the chair. Our EOC was active until around 4 in the morning the next day. However, through the night over, we worked with BC Wildfire and ensured structural protection units, all of our resource requests and support over was provided to the site as well. On August 19th, as well as the BC Wildfire Incident Command Team, which is a top tier team throughout to the province, over brought in individuals over specifically to respond to this wildfire. So we met up with them. And then the RUS and the city of Penticton and BC Wildfire essentially worked together over to respond to the incident. Obviously, the city of Penticton had an evacuation alert over within the city, and the RDOS had an order. So we worked very closly with their EOCs and following incident command systems and BSEMs of the British Columbia systems for how we make these decisions. On the 24th of August, over the RDOS, over receiving the certainty over that the wildfire was safe for the community within Heritage Hills, that it rescinded the order within the community. So throughout the week, our EOC worked within the structure of the EOC. We worked collaboratively following our structure and our procedures in place that we have, assisted the site and assisted the reception center as well. I would just like to say from the EOC director's perspective, our staff and volunteers inside have worked within their responsibilities. And from my perspective, they did an outstanding job in that perspective. That's just my quick update from here. And obviously we're going to be having an after action review and then at the end of it, there'll be a report that will be generated.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Sean. Are there any questions or comments for Sean? Yes, Director Albright, go ahead, please.
Yes, thank you. And I have some comments. And first off, I want to say thank you to Sean and all the staff and volunteers who helped an amazing success. 99% fantastic. And I'll get to the less than 1% in a second, where there's opportunity here for us to be mindful of what we can learn. And I'm going to speak to that in a moment. But the success, spectacular, and even more so in the context of COVID and a computer failure. We had firefighters on scene. Chief Oliver from the Okanagan Falls Fire Department was there later than 4 in the morning. We had over 85 firefighters come from as far as Armstrong there all through the night. I've toured the properties. I've seen the fires in the yards adjacent to homes. The success is spectacular. The orderly evacuation, the police, the search and rescue, the volunteers at the evacuation center, all amazing. And Sean himself took calls for me at late hours and gave me guidance and help and much appreciated. And when I said, for example, on Wednesday, the second day of the fire, all I wanted for my birthday the following Saturday was to spend the night in my own bed, he said, Director Obrecht, maybe next year, which I appreciated, the honesty and the humor and the comfort and the words and the sensitivity. I cannot say enough to every member of this board to please go back to your fire departments and make sure they hear from our community the great appreciation. It's overwhelming, and it is a big success, and I think you all need to take acknowledgement for the job well done. With respect to the less than 1%, I'm sure every single member of this board can relate to the kind of stress that our community members were under when they lost their homes and they're afraid of COVID and they don't know what's going on. And I heard numerous accounts of communication not being what they would have liked. And I use the example, and this is a metaphor, but it's a teaching metaphor. Every single week, I have about 4,000 members of my area who don't call me and don't thank me for the garbage being picked up. Every week, no one calls. But the one day the garbage doesn't get picked up, I get countless calls from people saying the garbage didn't get picked up. Now, what I do is I listen and I follow through and I try to help out. When we hear that our communications could be better, I think that's a real important message for us to hear and to listen to. The other question I had over and over and over and over is what happened? What's the cause of the fire? And I think, like a plane crash, it's good practice this is not about blaming, it's not about complaining, but I think there's a legitimate question for us at the board and the community to learn what happened. When did the fire start? What was the response? Is there something that we can learn from? Can we do better? And I'm asking for and I'm hoping for that kind of review and report back in due course. And then finally, many members in our community have contacted me with concern about planning issues, whether it's steep slope or dangers with respect to geotechnical and other environmental matters. So that's something I think we can listen to and we can add to our list of things in the future For example, the house we lost had a cedar shake roof. From talking with firefighters, there was a bomb of ember that hit that roof. They would have saved it if they could. They saw it. They were on site. They saved the adjoining properties. They learned from the 2003 fire in Kelowna. They're well trained. These are volunteer fire departments, incredibly well trained. They brought in water from outside the region. They doused the houses. They put out. And so by way of update, as of yesterday, I had a call from a community member who there was another fire just not far from their home. And there were people there putting it out. This fire is not under control, but our region is relatively safe. But even yesterday, flames, and I said, how does that happen? And they told me what they understood, which is something to do with roots and underground and burning. Well, all of that is worrisome, but also how grateful are we that there are people there taking care of that. And every day we see the helicopters fly overhead every day. And in the early days, we had 9 helicopters on the Wednesday, 11 on the Thursday, 15 on the Friday. Well, it's information, but I know it, but that's the kind of information people who live there, they appreciate. And I think in some respects, those are fair questions. So as we go forward, I just want to conclude by saying thank you again. Over 99%. That's a good mark. Well done. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And those small concerns, they're understandable that people are expressing that concern. And I want to make it clear, in no way is this meant to be delivered as a complaint or a blame or a criticism or a harassment or a bullying or anything like that. What this is legitimate feedback and concern. And I've told my community members I will give voice to their concerns, which I'm doing right now. And I want to thank you for listening, all of you. And I think the board members in particular, I thank you for listening, because every single one of us live in a community where we face these issues, and all of us benefit when we learn. And I think what we learned here is we learned what a good job can be done, even in a COVID pandemic and in a computer hack. I mean, remarkable good job. Well done. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. I'll go to Director Bloomfield. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, and through the chair, I'm wondering, in order to get a full debriefing, could we get a presentation from the other agencies involved, like the BC Wildfire Service and the City of Penticton, so that we can understand how we did, and it's always easier for somebody on the outside looking in to maybe come up with some suggestions as to how to improve in the future, because that's what debriefing is all about, is recognizing how we can improve in future situations. And so I'd be interested to hear the input from those other agencies at the debriefing.
Yeah, so that's a standard procedure after any event, Madam Chair, is that there will be a debriefing. They're still fighting the fire. So once that concludes, we're in the process right now of engaging an independent facilitator to arrange the debriefing, and we'll get all of the interested parties into the room and go through the what went well, what went wrong scenario, and then we'll produce a report at the end. But at this point in time, I think each of those agencies still needs to wrap up and put their thoughts together, and as we get them all into the same room and they can interact with each other and provide that sort of information, we'll have a much stronger report at the end of it. So that will come. In the meantime, we still have some structural issues that we need to address. We know that when we did the establishment bylaw and set up the Protective Services Committee as the legislative arm and the CAO group as the administrative arm of our emergency management system, that we needed to get the CAO group together. And we started that in July, and then this stuff got in the way. So I think after this experience, we know that this is more immediate, and we need to get the group together and have that structural discussion. And then also, this was probably the first time where we had this sort of fast-moving event that implicated a huge number of people. So that interaction between the agencies is going to be seen in a new light, I think, now that we have had this experience. So that is yet to come as well, and I'll try and re-engage the CAO group now that everybody's done their holidays, and we'll get working on that. So I think both of those aspects, that workshop with the CAO group, that was the one that we were going to have Mr. Matusi in to facilitate for us, based not only on his skills, but also his experience with the Central Okanagan Emergency Management Program. So lots of work to do on this, but certainly the debrief is going to be an important part to finish it up.
Okay, thank you. I'll go to Director Robinson. Go ahead, please.
Thank you to the chair. After having been an evacuee myself, I'd also like to extend my sincere thanks, not only to just our own emergency services, but especially to all the fire departments that came to our aid. And I'm very pleased to hear that we're going to have a full after-action review, because I think it's become obvious with the speed that some of these emergencies can run at that you can never be too prepared. I've been through a lot of emergency preparedness action planning myself, and thought that I was very well prepared. And I can see even in our own family, we have a little tweaking to do. So congratulations to everyone, and I look forward to the review. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll go to Director Monteith next. Go ahead, please.
To the chair, so I think maybe my question is more of an internal process to when these sort of events occur. And I know that following social media, the absence of the Okanagan Falls Fire Chief as well as the Electoral Area Director were noticed. I don't know to their fault, but maybe in the future, I guess somehow including those two key pieces also with some of the media opportunities. I know when I was doing some research, when there's other events, typically the fire departments have a presence or the director has an opportunity to have those sort of that voice to the community that's familiar. And I understand that as directors that we do elect a chair that represents the entire board. And Carla, you did an amazing job. But I'm wondering if there is an opportunity in the future to consider having the director of that area have a voice or have an opportunity with the fire chief to kind of bring the whole picture together, because I think that might have been missing for the residents.
Yeah, we'll certainly take that into account during the debrief, Madam Chair.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Director Monteith. I still see hands up. I think that they're leftover hands from the past three speakers, unless someone had a new question or comment. Director Bloomfield, did you have another question or comment? No? Okay. Anybody else have a question or comment for Sean? Okay, I'm not seeing any. Okay, great. Thank you very much for that update, Sean, and thank you for all your hard work on that fire, along with the whole team here at the RDOS and the City of Penticton, BC Wildfire, and many, many other agencies that helped out with that. We did add to the agenda, so we're going to do F2 next. We added the Declaration of State of Local Emergency approval that was sent out via email. CAO.
Thanks, Madam Chair. There is a regulatory requirement that when a local government goes into a state of local emergency, that the board is the final authority on that. So the chair is given the permission to declare the state of local emergency. Is supposed to try and get that support from the board prior to the event, but in most cases, because they've moved fast, that is impossible. So the chair takes the responsibility for declaring the state and then goes retroactively to the board of directors for ratification of that. And under legislation, a state of local emergency can only last for 1 week. If that expires, then you need to also get ratification of the extension. So that's what this report is about, Madam Chair, is to get the board support for or ratification for the declaration of the state of local emergency and for the extension, and then also for your action to rescind the order once the safety issue was addressed.
Okay, great, thank you. I'm looking for a mover, Director Obrick. Give him the honors on this one. And seconded by Director Pendergraft. So all of the motions have been moved. Any questions, comments, concerns on that? Could we get that report off the screen, please? Thank you very much. Okay, now I can see faces. I'll ask again, were there any questions or comments on this? Director Obrick.
Just a comment, and again, thank you. And I know we can't say thank you enough, but really thank you to the chair and thank you to the CAO and staff. You have to, I said to media in one of the first calls, you know, I couldn't think of a better place to be homeless than Penticton. But it's, you know, that's a joke. It's not fun, and it wasn't fun. I didn't like it. I don't think anyone liked it. I think you need to know how much we appreciate what you did, and so just thank you.
Thank you very much, Director Obrick. Okay, this is a corporate vote. I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, thank you. Hands can come down. And was anyone opposed? Okay, thank you. Motion carries. And that takes us to G, CAO reports. Any updates?
Nothing
CAO.
new for me, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. H is chair's report. Got a couple things to update on. So of course we've extended huge thank yous to everybody involved in the fight of the Christie Mountain wildfire. I did want to pass on that I received a message from Penticton Fire Chief Larry Watkinson, who wanted to express his thanks to the team here at the RDOS, and in particular to our rural fire departments for their excellent response. He said, passes on his gratitude and stated, quote, they're a first-class bunch of firefighters, end quote. So thank you from Chief Larry Watkinson. We really appreciate his feedback. Also, as you are aware, we are moving forward with public engagement related to the proposed compost facility for our application to the Agricultural Land Commission. And you have received an information update, which we also have posted to our website, and that's regarding Regional Connections, which is our new interactive portal. If you have not checked that out, please do. So it's really well done. Have a look at that site. So we have a couple projects there. We have the proposed compost facility, so there's information there that the public can access. And we are also beginning with a 2020 citizen survey. And that survey is running September 2nd to November 1st. And we will have that feedback probably late November or so for the board from the citizen survey. So please check out that portal. And if there's any questions on the portal, Christy, should they come to you?
Sure, yeah, that would be great.
Okay, any questions on that, please forward them to Christy Malden. Thank you. So we are going to go on to H2, which is director's motions. Everyone can see we have a motion from Director Pendergraft that has been submitted. And I'll go to Director Pendergraft on this.
Yes, I'd like to make the motion, please.
Okay, it's been moved by Director Pendergraft, seconded by Director Bush. Okay, and any questions or discussion on this motion? Go ahead, Director Pendergraft.
If I could quickly speak to it, thanks,
Yes.
Chair. I'm putting this forward and it's been an issue kind of for the last several years, actually, but I was unsure how to deal with it. And I think this might be the best way to make it work. ESDPs are problematic when they're applied at the building permit stage due to the fact that people are already expecting that the issues have been taken care of during the development of the subdivision. And that's where I think the actual most benefit for the environmental protections can actually take place, is at that stage of the game. So I strongly feel that And there's always been also a bit of a concern with the wording in the environmentally sensitive development permit bylaw in regards to the conflict with fire smarting properties. And I think the Christie Mountain Fire drives home the need to be able to fire smart around your properties. So that's part of this motion as well, is no way can the environmentally sensitive development permits interfere with a person's ability to fire smart their properties. So I ask the board to support this and get back some information from staff on the best way to make this happen at the subdivision and rezoning stages.
Okay, thank you. I'll go to Director Oberick.
Yes, and thank you. And I just want to speak to this in support of Director Pendergraft. I've heard the exact same issues in our community, and I really admire and appreciate the effort to tweak and make the process better for all concerned. I've had community members frustrated with old streams that aren't there anymore, creating impediments to reasonable request. And, you know, when you hear people frustrated at that level, it's good to listen and see if we can do better. And I see this as a motion in that direction, and I fully support it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll go to Director Coyne Senior.
Yeah, I'd like to support this motion, and I totally agree with we need to look at these things a little better, and I think it's strategic planning is something that we should really consider, is the effects of some of these bylaws we put in place, because we have to live with them for a long time once they're there. And especially the one that Director Oberick just brought up is one that's, I've had 2 complaints about this past week alone, about these streams that don't exist. You know, they're leftovers on maps that somebody put there years ago that don't exist. And they're very problematic for the area that we live in, where we have steep mountains, and, you know, we make it incredibly expensive for our constituents to try and work around these issues. So I'm totally in support of Director Pendergraft's motion today, and I believe we really need to visit this again. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I can add that, you know, I've seen similar problems in Area E, and I do agree that the best place to deal with this is at the subdivision stage and rezoning. And I've also heard from the issue of ESDPs, and when something is done wrong, there are certainly challenges with enforcing. That's another issue, is actually enforcing when someone's doing something in an ESDP area that they shouldn't be doing. So I look forward to seeing a staff report back with some additional direction and suggestions. Before I call the question on this, are there any other comments or questions? I am not seeing any hands up. Okay, I will call the question then. All in favor? Thank you. Hands can come down. And is anybody opposed? Okay, not seeing any. Motion carries. Thank you very much. That takes us to the final item. Did anybody have an update they'd like to provide from their area to the board today? Yes, Director McCordoff, go ahead, please.
Thank you very much. It's been a most interesting month watching what's going on in Penticton and OK Falls and seeing the fire reports, and I certainly do appreciate hearing all about that. In Osoyoos, we also had an EOC set up because we, at the same time, were concerned about the Palmer Lake fire, which was down south of Oroville, but was moving very swiftly, and our fire department and EOC was busy trying to make sure that we were as prepared as possible, especially when we had some of our residents who went on Facebook and announced that it had jumped the border. And of course it hadn't, but we were trying to deal with those issues down here. So we kind of were totally fascinated by what was going on up in Penticton, and certainly appreciated what we heard. And I know several people that lived up there in Heritage Hills that were, and we've heard from some of them today, who were very appreciative of everything that was done. So down here, we were very appreciative as well of what was going on down in the States, because as a general rule, they don't jump onto fire as quickly as we do in Canada. And they realized this one could have been a wild one, especially with the winds. So I just wanted to bring you up to date on that. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. I'll go to Director Gettens. Go ahead, please.
Great, thank you to the chair. It's not so much an update on my area, but I just wanted to point out that we're on our 11th virtual meeting. And this would have been our 12th if we didn't cancel the last meeting in March. And so we're at a tipping point where we're spending more time virtually together as a board than in person. And I think it's been a really great workaround, but it's just not as effective. So today the KPU presentation was hard for me to hear. The chair made a request for faces on screen, which I agree with, but it does depend on your internet stability. And we had another director who couldn't really get in today. So I just wanted to make sure that, I want to restate my preference that we're moving towards a schedule that allows us to have meetings and create space that's modified for COVID so that we can regularly meet. Also meeting with staff as a group, I'm definitely missing that face-to-face with staff as well. So I don't know if it's sub-region cohorts or we meet in person, alternate like one meeting a month or something, but I'm feeling uncomfortable continuing meeting virtually, especially getting all these great emails from my kids in school and put in. I think they've done an outstanding job, and I think there's ways we can look at this creatively, but I also recognize that we're going into budget season, and I think we need to be able to spend some time together. So that's my comment. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Director Gettens. We'll go to Director Monteith next, please.
I wanted to share that the famous property in Caledon, Sickle Point, is up for sale, and my community is hoping to purchase it. So I know within the community we have 75,000 in pledges, which is a small step towards the 3.1 million asking price. But if it has any investors around, we'd love to hear from them. Anyways, we're hoping to purchase it and make it a conservation land so that the future can enjoy a undeveloped piece of Skaha Lake. So thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Did anybody else have a comment? Yes, Director Obert, go ahead, please.
Two different things. One, I echo what Director Gettens said and would love if we could have meetings. I've been here the last two meetings because I had a wildfire, I had no home, and then my computer systems failed, and I love being back here, and I think we're missing out a lot by not having in-person meetings, and boy, virtual meetings are better than no meeting, but I agree with Director Gettens. My second point is on, I had two notice of motions, and I may be too late, so I can put it over to next meeting, but if it's not too late, I will speak to them.
Yeah, sorry, we're okay to back up. I only dealt with Director Pendergraft, so yes. Any notice of motions? Director Obert.
Thank you. And two, the first one, we reviewed the economic development and recovery plan from Area D today, and I would like, with the help of staff, to have a motion to bring that back before the board for approval by the board, and adding it into our strategic planning so we can start to take steps towards action. And the second is a rise.
Hang on.
Madam Chair. So that will come with the minutes from committee to the next board meeting.
Yeah, so it actually doesn't need to be a notice of motion.
I thank you for that.
Yeah.
But I'm you guys have no idea how tough Area D is. I get so much pressure from constituents. And as much as I try to filter the language and translate it out of Okanagan Falls dialect, it's anyhow, moving forward, the second is on a matter that was touched on today and touched on last meeting, and I want to thank Director Knodel specifically for the idea, but a motion that would relate possibly a UBCM motion or maybe a board or both regarding us taking action to support increasing agricultural land reserves and things we can do to promote agriculture generally. This is of issue in Area D. I think it's an issue in a lot of our areas. I heard Director Bush talk about it today. And, you know, we had a matter in Area D with Vassal Lake that went before the Agricultural Land Commission recently. We have the landfill issue we're dealing with land there that ALR, and I know a lot of members in my community, they would like to see more land in the ALR or steps taken to increase that. And so if we can look into that, support that, there may be ways that we can take action in ways that can support agriculture and increase our food security. Thank you.
Okay, so your notice of motion is to have staff research options for promoting an increase in agricultural land.
Well, two parts. One, perhaps a UBCM motion encouraging a province-wide support for increasing ALRs.
There's a cutoff on UBCM.
It'll be another year.
Yeah, it'd be next year.
I'm so far ahead, I'm working on next year.
Okay.
And then but locally, and we can put that off a while for UBCM, but locally, maybe there's something we can do and have staff look at it. I think I've heard enough people at this board table, even today, express this concern. It maybe it's time for us to have a conversation on what can we do and it may be small steps, but every small step matters. Every small step.
Christy, have you got what Director Rubrick's notice of motion is, which will come back next time as a
we can always
motion?
touch base.
We can tweak it later. Okay, I see Director Boop, you have your hand up. Is it regarding this? Go ahead, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. People hear me. I've got a fan on here. I'm just wondering if there might be, and I know that we're not going to be getting this report until probably early in 2021, but I'm wondering if the recommended or the policy section of the Institute for Sustainable Food Systems report will give us some ideas on where there are policy gaps, not necessarily just for preserving and moving more land into the agricultural land reserve, but other policies related to that. Just a thought. I realize I really appreciate this notice of motion that's come forward by Director Obrick. So thank you, Director Obrick. Just a thought that maybe there is some information in there that might be helpful as we look at this a little bit closer. Thank you.
Great, thank you. That's definitely a good recommendation. There's the current information, and the final report would certainly benefit staff and us as we move forward with that. And Director Monteith, did you have a comment related to this or separate? Or was that, I think that was a leftover hand? Okay. Thank you. So my apologies on just dealing with Director Pendergraft's motion. Did anybody else have a notice of motion to present today? Looking for hands, not seeing any. Okay, then back to H3. Were there any other updates, comments from board members before we move to adjournment today? Looking for hands, not seeing anybody. Okay, not seeing anything. I therefore am looking for a motion to adjourn. Director Bush, thank you. Director Obrick, seconded. All in favor? Thank you very much, everybody, for joining us this morning. Have a good 2 weeks. And I'll ask just if anybody's opposed. I don't think Director Canoodle's opposed. There's a leftover hand. I'm sure he's, yes, thank you. Okay, thank you, everyone. Bye.